Jimmy's not Casey Kasem, but he does have a countdown.
You are Locked On Bama, your daily podcast on the Alabama Crimson Tide. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back into Locked On Bama. Luke Robinson, that's me. Jimmy Stein, that's him. Thank you for making us your first listen every single day. Jimmy, we are going to continue on with your countdown today. We got three interesting names.
10 people listening to the show who know who Casey Kasem is. Thankfully, I'm one of them.
Well, if you have the 70s on 7 for Sirius XM, you know, because every now and again, by the way, people always say I do all these
that one's bad.
funky Simpsons references. One time when Bart had a song that was just, it like shot up the charts, but then it wasn't Bart. Bart had fallen down a well. So people were singing a song like, We Are the World to
raise money to get Bart out of the well. Yeah.
And then when they found out it was all a hoax, that Casey Kasem came on and said, and falling out of the top spot is, get him out of the well or whatever it was. And moving into the top spot is I Do Believe We're Naked by Funky C, Funky Do. I do believe we're naked. I love that. I mean, what a great song title. Anyway, couple of
your Casey impersonation wasn't terrible. It wasn't terrible. It wasn't spot on, but it wasn't terrible. I could sort of tell who it was.
And moving all the way up the charts. I can't do it anymore. All right. So anyway, couple of notes before we get into your countdown.
Yep.
The Alabama, Western Kentucky, thank the good Lord in heaven that this game's at 6:00. Look, it's still going to be hot, but it's not going to be, oh God, I need an ambulance hot. It's going to be
best news of the year. Probably the best news since we hired Kalen DeBoer, right?
It's some of the best. I still say Ryan Williams is his own category.
Oh yeah, but that's fair. That's fair. Summer of Ryan Williams.
6:00 kick is very manageable, and look, it also what it does. I pulled up that LSU. There's a site that's great for those who don't know about it. It's lsufootball.net / or just / tvschedule.htm. I'm sure y'all wrote all that down, but it is a site that tells you the whole schedule throughout the year. Now, they've only updated week 1 for next year, but it's great because it tells you what games are on TV and when. And what I didn't know until just now was that the Clemson Georgia game's at 11:00.
That's great. It's crazy to me that it is, but it's also great because, well, there's your 11 to 2 o'clock plan on day one.
Yeah.
Game day featuring Nick Saban. And by the way, it's going to be the Texas A&M Notre Dame game. That's where they're going to be at in College Station. So you got your Nick Saban from 8 to 11, and then you got your Georgia Clemson from 11 to 2. And, I think Georgia's going to win, but I also think – I'm not saying people are underestimating Clemson. I think it's a combination of two things, Luke. I think Georgia's very good, and I would put them number 1. But I also don't think they will blow out Clemson. I think that game's going to be somewhat close. I'm going to say right now Georgia will win by around 10 or 13 points and maybe have to do that heavy lifting in the fourth quarter.
The only problem with Clemson next year, and I like Cade Klubnik, and I think they've got some dudes. Look at Clemson, they recruit a little differently. They find, they get a handful of 5 stars, high 4s, and then they get a bunch of, pretty good dudes to surround them with. And the one thing about Clemson this year, though, in the time of chimpanzees, I was a monkey, to quote Beck. But he, in a time of transfer portal, he's not using it. Clemson is one of 4 schools, the other 3, I think, being the service academies, that didn't get any transfers at all. And that's just, it's just,
can't imagine what it's like to be on the Clemson boards right now, because that's you're handing the critical fans, you're handing them ammunition by running the program in that manner. So it's fine if you win, and that's why I tell anybody, I'm like, I'm not critical on the surface of it. Is he winning? And if the answer is no, it's fair to be very critical of that.
If you're absolutely right, and that's the bad news for Dabo Swinney, because if you start out with a loss to Georgia and you're 0-1 right out the box, now you still have a shot at the playoffs because there's expanded and all those things, but you are immediately going to be criticized about, what if you let's just say you miss a 45-yarder to win the game and you lose. The immediate criticism will be, why didn't we go get that kid Alabama got? Will be the immediate criticism.
No, that's exactly right. And but here's the thing about the playoff, when you said, oh, well, they could lose to a loss to Georgia would mean nothing for Clemson making the playoff. Nothing, because the ACC champion is almost certainly getting in, period. So they could lose 2 more games and likely get in the playoff as the ACC champion, assuming the ACC champion is one of the top 5 highest ranked of the top 5 highest ranked conference champions. It's very likely to happen. So Clemson losing to Georgia will mean nothing in terms of the playoff, but it will mean everything in terms of program momentum and the criticism.
Perception.
Because like I said, perception and Dabo just opening himself up for the body shots by not participating in the transfer portal. Now, my understanding is, Luke, by the way, and I don't know the Clemson program like we know Alabama. We're not locked on Tigers, but I think Clemson tried to land a handful of guys out of the portal and just didn't. Whether probably ending up short on NIL or whatever reason, but I think Clemson did try to land a couple of kids and didn't. And if that's the case, then some of the criticism is not warranted. I mean, when you try and to sign a kid and not, one of the things I get frustrated with, with fans is when you do end up short on a player and they want to blame, the coaching staff for not recruiting hard enough or whatever. Some things are just beyond your control. You put out a great effort and you try and the kid just makes another choice. That's not necessarily anyone's fault,
Yeah, but I mean, message boards aren't exactly known for their sanity. So
no, but I'm just saying, I think with Clemson, if Clemson's trying to sign kids out of transfer portal and failing, that's different than he's not participating in the portal. That's
correct.
That's completely different. And my understanding is they have tried. Now, if you're only trying for the biggest fish and those guys cost $1 million and you're showing up with 100,000, then I'm not sure you're really trying. But I don't know what all the details are.
It's a lot like Patty and Selma from The Simpsons, where Selma chose a life of celibacy, and Patty just had celibacy thrust upon her. Okay. Very quickly, one other game time that was announced, and they've just decided, I guess they want to play this game in lava, is Miami at Florida at 2:30. Sweet Mother Earth, that is going to be hot.
It's going to be warm in Gainesville at 2:30 on the first Saturday in September, but will I watch? That will certainly be a game we monitor for sure. And it would be big. I know it's not kosher for a lot of fans to cheer for other SEC schools, but it matters. It matters. If it matters 1 inch to help Alabama, then I'm in. All it's got to help Alabama is an inch.
Florida. I'm also for the train wreck. So, I mean, I'm a little bit of both. I mean, I'm for Florida because SEC. I'm for any SEC team not named Auburn, typically. Even Tennessee, even LSU, I pull for them generally.
If it helps Alabama, and then helping the league can help Alabama, and particularly in the playoff committee era where now the playoff committee can invite as many SEC teams as they want. So that's helpful to Alabama, right? So maybe the league being as appealing as possible to the committee is helping Alabama. So I'm generally for the SEC teams to win for that reason. Doesn't mean that I'm a fan of and wishing good things upon them. I'm just trying to help Alabama.
Yeah, I mean, it's just.
I guess you could say though, me sitting on my couch and cheering for Florida to beat Miami doesn't really help Alabama. I guess you could argue that.
The fluttering
I guess
wings of a
that's
butterfly could cause a hurricane or a typhoon and whatever. There's some saying
I'm
about that.
flapping my butterfly wings like a madman over here trying to help Alabama.
Keep going, DeBoer. Keep going, DeBoer.
Exactly.
All right, passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and much more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered with over 122 million parts. For your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, you're not burning cash, man. Come on. With all the parts you need at the price you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home that huge win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions do apply, and eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Okay, so countdown time, and we have been thrust upon William Sanders. Got to be a better way to say it.
Man, I like this kid. You know, so many offensive linemen. To me, it's just a different position. It's a team within the team, and Sanders is an ideal personality for that offense. He's a leader. He's really mature. He's kind of one of these. You know, you listen to William Sanders talk, and you think you're talking to a 30-year-old. I mean, in terms of just how smart, polished he is, and mature, and guys like that are just great additions to the offensive line. I think he's a great center prospect on intangibles alone. And then you watch the tangibles. I mean, hey, this is a guy that, and again, he was an old staff guy, and this is a Nick Saban signee, not a DeBoer signee. The Saban staff identified him early in his career at Brookwood and never let him go. Didn't matter where he was ranked. And by the way, at the end, On 3 ranked him, pretty high. But this is a guy that Saban staff identified and never wavered on. He was a take for them going back to his junior year. They've always loved William Sanders. I think his dad's a Tuscaloosa sheriff, which is just, I think, a really cool job for an offensive lineman's family. I like Sanders a lot. A couple things. He's down here low on the list because, like we said, the low part of the list is for guys I project a red shirt. It's not crazy to project the offensive lineman to red shirt. So I think it's a year for him to get bigger, stronger. But I won't be surprised at all, Luke, if this is a guy that contends for a starting spot in a redshirt freshman or redshirt sophomore year because he's so mature. It's just a matter of getting bigger, and there being an available spot for him helps. The position versatility helps. I think he can play center or guard.
Well, and we need all the versatility we can get right now, don't we? I mean, that's one of the things, especially out of our offensive linemen. So, one thing that I thought about was I hate to see him this low, but I think you're right. I think that's where he needs to be. The next guy we're going to talk about is Rico Scott. Now, here is an interesting case to me. I find him both to be underrated and overrated. Because I'm just not sure what to think. I think he's a fabulous player, but I'm wondering, what am I missing that he's not ranked higher? And so in my mind, I'm like, well, he must be overrated somehow, because it feels like he's so underrated that he's overrated. It's lapped back over. Because when I watch him play, I'm like, this guy's a dude. Why isn't he ranked higher? And every time I saw his stats, it was like he led them to, a big victory, or he had 3 touchdowns on 4 catches. I mean, some stuff like that. So what am I missing, Jimmy?
No, I mean, that's basically the way I would describe Rico Scott. Another Saban guy, another Saban signee who they fought for the whole time. I mean, just like Sanders. I think Rico Scott came to Alabama as a young player in camps, and they're like, we want this guy. They identified him really summer after his 10th grade season, right before his junior year started. And then, and they never let him go. They're like, this is a guy we want. So this is a Saban guy through and through. You got to trust Nick Saban in his evaluations, to say the least. But at the same time, he's not a guy that was ranked super high nationally. Not a guy that made a charge at the national top 100 type prospect. But then you watch the tape, like Luke said, crazy productive. I mean, this guy gets open, catches the ball, makes a play as good as any wide receivers you're going to find on tape. I have him pretty low too, obviously down here in the 81 area, ranked 81 out of 87 guys. And why is that? I'm projecting a red shirt. But this is the part of the list, Luke, we've reached, I think, with Rico Scott. I'm a little less sure about the red shirting now. I mean, I was pretty adamant about the guys below. By the way, somebody went back on BOL and on 3 and totaled up guys in the last couple of things that I've done like this last couple of years, these projected red shirts, and I'm batting about 90%. I mean, I got them all right, but I have apparently a good batting average on projecting the red shirts. Now, starting with Rico Scott, I get a little less adamant, and here's why. There's 12 wide receivers on scholarship. You're not normally going to play 12. And think of like last year, Luke, we redshirted Cole Adams, we redshirted Jaron Hamilton as wide receivers. So they didn't all play last year either. So it's reasonable to project red shirts when you have 12. On the other hand, DeBoer is going to throw the ball more, probably play more receivers. And I might be underrating Rico Scott. We both talked about this. He might be a little underrated by all of us. So I'm not sure about Rico Scott, but I'm sure enough that I have him at 81. And then the next wide receiver we'll talk to a few spots from now that I'm still projecting a red shirt that I have even less certainty about is Bubba Hampton, who was here this spring. By the way, Rico Scott was not here this spring, which I think also lends itself to he's probably going to redshirt. Bubba Hampton was here this spring. We'll talk about him a few spots higher, indicating I think he's more likely to play. But I still have Bubba Hampton as a likely projected redshirt. That's simply because how many receivers are you realistically going to play? Why waste a year because you play a guy in 5 games instead of 4? You've wasted a whole year if you've done that. And I know people say, oh, well, they're only going to stay 3 years anyway. Not Rico Scott. Yeah, don't redshirt Ryan Williams. but Rico Scott might very well be a 4 or 5 year college football player.
Yeah, and I really like his build, by the way.
Yeah,
he looks kind of like a Kalen DeBoer receiver to me.
I like that.
He looks like a more built. I'll tell you what, he looks like to me. Again, maybe I'm off. Tyrone Prothro if he were a little taller.
Oh wow, okay. I just like that his game is, like I said, he runs his route, gets open, he catches the ball, he makes a play. I mean, I don't know. I've just described what a wide receiver's job is, but he does that. He does that.
Good work on
That's
that.
exactly what he does. He's a wide receiver. I'm here. That's breaking news. He's a receiver. But no, he does those things extremely well. And I'll tell you another guy that I would describe that way watching his high school tape that I sort of like as a comp here is John Mechie, who also was similar in terms of runs the route, gets open, catches the ball, makes a play. Now, I'm not talking about a spectacular playmaker. That's the way I would describe Ryan Williams. But Rico, maybe a bit of a possession receiver. But I don't mean to say that like he runs a 4.8. No, I mean a possession receiver like, hey, here's a guy you can depend on when it's 3rd and 7.
Let me ask you something. And this would be a good you tell me in the comments if y'all think this would be a good podcast one day. If we just like each of us listed players and then like it's like word association. If I gave you a name and then you got to tell me what the first thing that comes to mind is and why. So, but I want y'all tell me if that would be a good
Rorschach ink blot test.
Yeah. Like, okay. So if, y'all tell me if that'd be a good summer podcast. It's not a good in-season podcast, but it's a good summer podcast. But I think when I say John Mechie, what do you think?
Cancer. Boy, that was dark.
Jeez.
That was dark. That was dark.
Okay, killed this.
Immediately what came to mind, I guess because I was so worried about him for so long, right?
Okay, but on the football, let me be more specific. Yeah. On the football field.
The 2-point play to beat Auburn, the 2021, immediately come out like when I'm like, okay, what's a play John Mechie made? When he got open at the line of scrimmage
against Auburn's best defensive.
Against Auburn's best corner on press coverage and did so in about a 3-yard area. Well, she probably has a different John Mechie memory.
That's what she was calling about.
Jimmy's cancer thing, that was terrible.
Now, okay, so that's a good one for me, and this is why I think this is a great exercise. It's the hit in the SEC championship game. It's not even a catch.
Yeah, the block, the crack.
No, it wasn't a block. It was a tackle.
Oh, it was a tackle. That's right.
He made the guy fumble.
He absolutely laid waste to a Florida player.
Yeah.
Wasn't it?
Yours is more important, but for whatever reason, I don't even think about. He had a long,
tough as nails, and it made me think: have we been playing this guy at the wrong position?
Well, he had a touchdown catch against Georgia, if you remember. That was big at that 2020 night game. He had 2 long touchdown passes against Texas A&M in 2020. You remember those. But and then I think he had a really nice catch against Miami, for a huge gain early. It may have even been a touchdown, but I think it was just a huge gain. But I think about his tackle. That's just kind of weird. Look, I got
such a good player. I remember a whole summer of a lot of Alabama fans not thinking he was good enough to be a number 1 receiver.
Gee, we were wrong.
Kid was plenty good, and doing well. Hopefully, this will be his breakout year. Obviously, spent the last year, recovering from the cancer, but he's good to go. And the Texans are doing good things. Got a good quarterback, so hopefully, good things will be happening to Metch's career.
Got to talk about game time now. Look, I want to tell y'all something. I don't even look at the game time. I don't read thing. I don't look at it because I tell y'all specifically that I've used Game Time multiple times. I highly recommend it. The best prices guaranteed. You can see where your seats are. It is like a couple of taps and you're done. It is so good. I've used it for NBA games, used it for World Series, used it for college basketball, college football, used it for just about every NFL. I've used it for a Miami Dolphins game. I've used it for everything. And look, I'm telling you, just go try it out, and it'll beat these other ticket places you go to. It just will, because they're the best. I mean, and the killer last minute deals, they got everything you need. You really want to check these guys out. Terms do apply, of course, like they always do, but you use code Locked On College for $20 off your first order. That's code Locked On College for $20 off your first order. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Okay, for this last segment, we get to a really interesting player, Sterling Dixon. This is a guy that I think Alabama fans ought to love, simply because he committed early at a time when people thought he would probably be headed to Auburn. I think a lot of people thought he was headed to Auburn or somewhere else. But he committed early. He never wavered, and he stuck with it through, dudes like him that commit early and stick with it, I think are going to become now more beloved than ever. It used to be sort of an afterthought because there wasn't so much flip-flopping, right? I mean, it used to be back in the day, there wasn't a lot of flipping. Well, now, when you commit somebody early, everybody's excited. They're like, oh, now we just got to hold on to him. We got to recruit him even harder. But Dixon never wavered, and he stuck with it, and he's a good player. Now, should he put on some weight? You're dang right he should put on some weight. But I think Dixon's going to be a dude.
Yeah, I got him down here at the projected red shirts, but again, we've reached the area of the rankings already where I'm a little less sure about red shirting. And in Sterling's case, it's just because he's such a good player. He was here this spring. We could do almost a whole show on how much I like this guy. For one thing, here's what impresses me the most about Sterling, Luke, is he played most of his career at Mobile Christian, which is a 3A. I think they're 3A, might be 4A, but they're 3A or 4A. They're mid-range, right? And he was a great player, especially at that level, where it's just a dominating presence playing, against 3A and 4A teams. His senior year, for whatever reason, he transfers to Spanish Fort. Now you're talking big-time football. That's 6A, but it might as well be 7A because Spanish Fort plays in a 6A region that may be the toughest region in Alabama, one of the toughest regions. Spanish Fort plays Saraland, Blunt, St. Paul's, Theodore. I mean, just one crazy schedule that they play. Spanish Fort does Daphne, which is 7A, Fairhope. So Sterling transfers there, and you would think, well, that's going to be a heck of a thing, stepping up from 3A to 6A. Oh, no. Sterling's production at Spanish Fort was insane, and he did it playing hurt. he was just as productive, or if not more so, playing with the big boys of Spanish Fort than he was at Mobile Christian. So I don't worry about Sterling stepping up to the SEC. I mean, I think he shows that this is a kid who can easily make that transition. Now, I still have him as a projected redshirt, Luke, but I will say there are a crazy amount, really, 4 true freshman inside linebackers were signed in this class. 4 of them. You only put 2 on the field, but we signed 4 in this one group. Sterling Dixon, Justin Okoronkwo, Caden Jones, and QB Reese. I think one of them, I'll give away some of the list right here. I have them all as projected redshirts, all 4. But I actually think odds are one of them's going to play. One of them, either Okoronkwo, Caden Jones, or Sterling Dixon, or QB Reese. One of the 4 will play. I have Okoronkwo ahead of the others, to be honest. But that's largely based on how well he played on A-Day.
Let me say this, Jimmy. I think one of them, at least one of them needs to play for depth next year. Yeah. You know what I mean? Or you're going to be starting with a bunch of new dudes. I think you got to get somebody. You got to get somebody out there and get their feet wet. Yeah, I'm just between the 4 of them. And I agree with that 100%. I think one of them will play. I just couldn't settle on one because Okoronkwo looked like the best A-Day, but also makes the most sense. He would have the most learning to do based on coming from Germany. Sterling Dixon playing at Spanish Fort High School after playing for Ronnie Cottrell at 3 years Mobile Christian. You think, well, Sterling, he's step in and play right away, but he's the guy that needs to probably gain the most size. You know, redshirt year really help him size-wise. Maybe Caden Jones is the middle ground, who's played some good competition and is sort of big enough. So it's a fascinating thing to me because I'm with Luke. One of them probably needs to play. I just have a hard time settling on which one that I believe will. You could make the case that Okoronkwo's his inexperience with true American football. I know he's been playing in Germany, but we can all admit that's a little different. I know he's been playing with some grown men. It's all a little different. But I could make the argument that inexperience could hurt him. I could also make the argument that the fact that he has probably not learned any bad habits yet, and they have to reteach him some things, could be a super big positive because you saw my son here, and he's sort of working at Robinson Iron with us right now just for a couple of days before he goes back to Arizona State. And I've said it before, he has Asperger's. And so you have to be whatever you tell him is what he's going to do. And I think Okoronkwo's can be that way where you say, now do this. And he has to, he doesn't have to think about it. He's just going to do that because he doesn't know any other way. And my whole point was, my son having Asperger's is like, you got to tell him you have to tell him exactly what you want. Because if you don't, it won't be done that way because that's just the way his mind works. And I'm not obviously making fun of him or anything. I love him like my son, because he is my son. But anyway, that analogy went off the rails, and I was trying to make it work somehow. But he played the best on A-Day of the 3. So, I think that's the best. What's the evidence? Well, the evidence is A-Day is the most game-like thing, and Okoronkwo played better than Caden Jones and Sterling Dixon that day. And, of course, QB Reese wasn't out there yet. But at the same time, like Luke said, didn't Caden Jones have an interception in the All-American game or whatever he was in? Oh, in the All-American game he did. Game he did. By the way, I hear good things. I've got Caden ahead of Sterling. I hear good things really about all of them. But Caden Jones, I don't know if I want to go as far as say he was buzzworthy this spring, but I think they're pleased with what they have with him. All right, that's going to do it for today's podcast. We'll be back tomorrow with some more countdown stuff. This countdown stuff is just awesome. I know y'all love it. Y'all are great Americans. We will talk to y'all tomorrow, and until then, roll tide. Roll tide.